I think always within me and my personality, I've just had a lot of curiosity for things. Being inside the structure of the church, it kind of felt like it clashed up against some of the success that I wanted to feel. I kind of had to quiet some of that curiosity a little bit, and it always existed. So I think in a lot of ways, that's kind of what led me to question things even more, was just giving myself permission to be curious.
And I really appreciate his view of like, you have to relax, like when things hit your stuff, you relax and you release. And I just want to hear from you, like what you think about what releasing is, like in practical terms. Well, I really like what Michael Singer talks about. Basically, like you're happy all the time, and not like a stupid kind of happiness, right? Not like you're like delusional, right? But you're just, I don't know. I like what he says about it, okay? But the thing that it rubs up against my stuff is, what's the purpose? What's the purpose? Do you see a purpose in life through his lens?
And as personally is the fact that we don't know. I mean, the only thing that we know and we feel secure in is how we feel right now. If our needs are being met right now. And I think it's almost liberating to say and admit and really wrap your head around the fact that nobody knows. Nobody knows.
This is Infants on Thrones.
Baby steps.
You want someone to preach to you.
The philosophies of men.
I like magical toys.
You want religion, do you?
Mingled with humor.
I don't believe in them.
There will be many willing to preach to you the philosophies of men mingled with humor.
We are evolving.
Baby steps.
You can buy anything in this world of money.
Look for the good in everything. Look for the people who will set your soul free. It always seems impossible until it's done. Look for the good in everyone.
All right, so I am here with Scott and Jessica, and this is a follow-up to an episode that Scott and I did back in, when was it, Scott? Was it February, March?
I think March.
Yeah, something like that. It was called The Hand in the Glove. And so I think we're going to call this The Other Hand in the Other Glove, but I don't know if it's really going to be about hands or gloves or what. We'll see what it's about. And Jessica reached out to me about a month ago, having listened to that episode, but not being able to find it, and asked me if I could find which episode that was, because it had some special meaning to you. So we're just here today to have a conversation about things. So let's start with you, Jessica. Maybe you could introduce yourself, since this is your first Infants on Thrones appearance.
My name is Jessica, and my journey trying to figure things out and redefine things has been, close to a year now of just stepping outside of the framework that I had in religion, and then trying to create my own meaning and find what exists out there to construct purpose. And my brain just goes, it takes these ideas and it just goes. And I find a lot of times my family and friends, they'll listen to me for a little bit and go, whoa, wow, like we're not speaking the same language anymore.
Yeah.
So, just finding community and people that can kind of connect on a level, that kind of get some of these concepts, or at least have played around with them and applied them in different ways, I think is super fascinating. And to me, I think that's the beauty of life, is figuring out the tools that work for someone, or the way that they define meaning in ways in their life. So I'm always curious to know more and open to figure out different ways to incorporate things. So
very, very cool. And you said that in the last year you've been on a journey. What has that been?
Yeah. So I have a history in the LDS Church. I was actually, I think if you looked at my story, you'd think, okay, me being born in the church, both my parents were active members and they were both converts. And then when they divorced, they both decided to split away from the church. And so most of my upbringing, I kind of really was baptized in this, I don't know, this life of Mormonism. And then we went and had this break where the majority of my growing up from then was just, I don't know.
Not Mormon.
Whatever. Yeah, not Mormon.
Yeah.
Trying to figure it out, following the cues of my mom and what she was trying to discover without a lot of dialogue about it. So it wasn't until I was 18-ish, kind of coming into those years of figuring out how to lay a foundation, where I realized, and I'm looking back now, I see it almost as an act of rebellion in a lot of ways. Like, okay, you left this, well, I'm going to join this.
Oh, really? You were rebelling against your mom by going back to the Mormon church? That's awesome.
I mean, we laugh about it now because she's since, I don't know, she's just watched my process and evolution of things, where we can both realize that at the time that served a purpose for me.
Sure.
It did. It gave me a groundwork of, this is what you do and this was what will happen. And I hadn't had that up until that point. So yeah, I've been married. My husband and I have been married for 14 years and we have 5 kids, and we've done things up until this last year, kind of the model way within Mormonism. And in a lot of ways, it's been very successful, from, whatever ways you determine success. But yeah, I think always within me and my personality, I've just had a lot of curiosity for things. And I think being inside the structure of the church, it kind of felt like it clashed up against some of the success that I wanted to feel. I kind of had to quiet some of that curiosity a little bit. And it always existed. So I think in a lot of ways, that's kind of what led me to question things even more, was just giving myself permission to be curious. And
Cool. And so about a year ago, that's when, did you and your husband both come to this at the same time?
No.
About the church?
No, and it's actually our relationship. I'm the only one in our family, so it's a mixed faith relationship, which, I mean,
he still takes the kids to has church resumed yet? Like in-person church anywhere?
I think they have started to resume based on like scheduled meetings. So technically, yes, it started up. And I don't know, though, it's been a really interesting thing. I think even just approaching it from the standpoint of curiosity instead of I of course had that like angry phase, but it was never I never felt like a victim. It was more of this is interesting. I used this in this way before, but it no longer serves me in the same way. So I recognize in my husband that it does, these things are very meaningful and have a lot of importance in the way that he shapes his world and the way that he conducts himself. And I think having that difference has really been beneficial in kind of the healing process that you go through, instead of turning away and not really being faced with that dichotomy of belief. We can kind of face it because we have to in order for it to be successful in, any meaningful way now, recognizing, we are individuals and we find the things that we need to, make sense of life and whatever.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So you're doing the whole mixed faith marriage thing now. And if I remember, Scott, your marriage isn't completely mixed faith, but you're still attending church regular, or at least last time we spoke. Has there been any update since then?
No, there's no real update. So we, my wife doesn't really know how I feel about stuff like when it comes to the church, and so Jessica's
just espousing how important it is to have these conversations as individuals, and you're going, okay.
Well, I think it's important too.
Yeah.
And I've had, like in my process, I've changed a lot over the last probably 10 years. It's been when I kind of started to transition a little bit and escalating quicker and quicker. A couple of years ago, I would have said I was okay in the church, but I think probably last year and a half is when it really snapped in me, and I'm like, I don't like this anymore.
Mm.
And even now I feel like I'm changing more and more. I listen to like Radio Free Mormon and other podcasts, and like just recently I feel like I'm losing interest in those now. Like it's just kind of just not as interesting to me. So I really appreciate you like Bathing with God, and things that are branching out from that such narrow view of Mormonism. So I don't know, I've been thinking, I want to be honest and forthright, of course, but it's hard, it's really hard. And I have plans. We'll see if they ever come to fruition.
Yeah. And the episode that we did before was an email that you sent me with a bunch of questions, and we read through the questions and we talked about them. And then recently you sent me another round of questions based around these what the infant path to surrender, whatever those episodes I've been doing with Bill Reel. Right. It was really kind of around once you start just letting everything go, then what's the meaning? What's the purpose of life?
Yeah. So just so you know, I've listened to what's the first book by Michael Singer? The
Untethered Soul.
Yeah, the Untethered Soul, which is really cool, a really good book. And it's funny because I mentioned it to my wife, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I heard that on one of my Instagram people, and she wants to read it." I'm like, "Well, yeah, you should read it. I think it'll help you deal with me." But I also, you guys, that 8-part series that you guys listen to, there's like an Audible version of that.
Is there?
Yeah, and it's just 1 credit. And I don't know if it's the whole thing. It was like 8 hours long, I think.
Okay.
I don't think it's the whole thing you guys listen to, but it's an 8-part series.
It might be. Yeah. So I'll check that out.
Really, yeah, it's really, really cool. So I actually just finished it today. And if I were to ask you anything about that stuff, it would be really for you to drill in on, like I loved it all. It was really good. He's really cool. I like him, and I'll listen to it more. But I really appreciate his view of like, you have to relax. Like when things hit your stuff, you relax and you release. And I just want to hear from you, like what you think about what releasing is, like in practical terms. And then, but then also back to my email and while I really like what Michael Singer talks about, and just basically like you're happy all the time, and not like a stupid kind of happiness, right? Not like you're like delusional, right? But you're just, I don't know. I like what he says about it. Okay. And, but the thing that it rubs up against my stuff is, and I think about this a lot, but like, what's the purpose? What do you do? Do you see a purpose in life through his lens? And I think I do. I think he explains it. And especially since I finished it now, just the past few days. But I'd like to get your view on that. And that's one thing I really like about Jordan Peterson. And I know a lot of your audience probably hates Jordan Peterson's guts. But I really like him. And one of the things that's cool about him is one of his big mantras is finding meaning and responsibility. And so he'll say that, like, Jesus is an archetype, and how he of the best person, because what he did is he voluntarily took all this responsibility upon himself, and therefore has like the greatest meaning. And that responsibility from my perspective would be like the atonement, and eternal life and all that fun stuff. Anyway, so I really like that about Jordan Peterson, and like I like that idea of meaning, but it stresses me out, and so like I feel like I feel like there's going to be some kind of amalgamation of Peterson and Singer, and I'm going to come out as like some yogi master.
Right on. Well, when that happens, you'll need to let me know. So to address your question about meaning, I think for me, with that relax and release stuff, that kind of becomes the new meaning of life or purpose of life, is to anytime, so yesterday I was driving around with Cammie, and there's these cars that were just going so slow in front of me, and I was getting so annoyed with them. And she's like, why are you getting annoyed? I thought you were like relaxing and releasing Michael Singer stuff. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I will, but I'm going to play with it. I'm going to have fun with it. And, that's one of the examples that he gives in there. The things that bother me come up all the time. They still always come up. And so part of the game of it is being aware, oh, it's happening again. All right, how am I going to respond to it this time? And I don't know that I have like the best answer on how to relax and release, but just to acknowledge it, like not, because I don't want to bury my head in the sand, like it's not happening. But just kind of be like, oh, it's happening again. The biggest thing when there's things that are really hard that happen, I'll just breathe and I'll relax my body. I'll just like feel my muscles relax, just be kind of like, all right, here it is. And then get through it. And that does become the purpose and the meaning of my life for now, at least, is to try to deal with things when they happen and they hit my stuff in a like more going with the flow kind of way than really getting annoyed with it. And also I think the other part of it is recognizing when there's nothing going on around me and I'm getting annoyed by something or bothered by something or afraid of something, because I'm doing it, because I'm creating that anxiety about thinking about something in the future that hasn't happened and might not happen, but now it's impacting me in this moment because I'm worrying about it. Or I'm thinking about something in the past that I did that I regret, and that's having this impact on me. There's not anybody in a car in front of me that's bothering me. It's me doing it to myself with my own thoughts, and recognizing, oh, I'm doing this to myself again. How do I relax and release through that? Because that's a full-time job, man.
Right. What's the balance between thinking about your future? You know what I mean? Like, you need to think about your future. You need to
sure.
Yeah,
of course.
I guess so. What's the balance between that and like worrying too much? And I guess if you're worrying too much, you're worrying too much, right? But like for instance, so in my line of work, it can be pretty stressful, right? So,
and you're a divorce attorney, right?
Yeah, I'm a divorce attorney, so most of my days are spent putting out fires,
Yeah.
And so people's lives are on fire, and I got to put out the fire. And so I'll get like an email or a voicemail, or just something is looming on the on the horizon. And I had a policy. I started a policy like right when I started, that once, like, I don't look at my email after 5 o'clock or over the weekend, because it'll just ruin my whole day, because I'll get some email and I'll stress over it. And I realized back then that like, why I don't need to think about it till Monday. So I'm not going to worry about it till Monday. Right. But now I feel like I'm doing that was smart, but it's not the smartest thing to be doing, and like how, so like if I have like this email or just something kind of pushing on I need to relax and release that somehow, I think. Right. But I also need to worry. Like, I can't just be like, oh, it's not like, I don't need to worry about it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. What do you think, Jessica?
I have an example. This is something I actually haven't shared with you in our conversations, but I actually deal with chronic illness as well. I was born with a tethered spinal cord, and it's a degenerative by nature condition. And I've had maintenance surgeries on my spinal cord to keep it stable so that it doesn't progress as quickly. But within, the last few years especially, I've had a lot of damage and a lot of symptoms that have really kind of put me in this place of, okay, I'm losing control as I'm getting old. Like, this is gonna always be part of my reality, that the parts that I can control are less and less. But it's sitting within that space of being like, okay, there's so much that I have no power over, but I have power over the way that I respond to it. Mm-hmm. And I think part of when I started questioning my faith, it was this process of giving myself that power back, of being like, oh, it's within my capabilities to trust that I will be able to handle the situation that I'm in, however it arises. Because at this point now, I know that things have come up out of nowhere, and I deal with different symptoms and stuff of that. And one of them, quite frankly, is the fact, because of where my condition's located on my spinal cord, it affects everything from the waist down. So there's a lot of things that you kind of have to overcome, as far as even societal ideas of what it means to control your bowels and your bladder. Like, that is a real thing. And those are the things, the ideas that you kind of shove out of your mind. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, there will be things that we have no control over, yet we always will, to an extent. And so keeping ourselves in that moment, like, conversation has been in that zone of trusting that whatever moment we're in, we'll be able to fully utilize whatever we have to be able to accomplish what we need to. I don't know.
That's great. Yeah. And now you've also told me that you've gone back to school and you're studying some really interesting stuff. And I don't remember exactly what, but it's about like the brain, cognition, psychology. What is it?
Psychology.
Okay.
So it makes me sound like I'm really smart, but I'm just a entry-level student here. But
just an entry-level student. Come on.
Going into
well, we're just infants.
Right now, like, I don't know. It's super fascinating. And it really, like, there have been pivotal moments where I've really seen things connect, in the sense of, I know I mentioned with you the idea of homeostasis, and how I see that societally everywhere, this striving for this equilibrium of, just an ideal, optimal functioning level, I think the parallels between, neuroscience and the way that you look at organisms, microorganisms, there's so much there where we can step out of that and view us as being a part of this, biosphere in our own right. And I talked to my husband about this, and sometimes he's just like, that's not comforting at all. The fact that you find comfort in, reducing yourself to a state of, an organism. But to me, it helps because I have that parallel of, okay, we're just a part of the naturalistic world, functioning with these behaviors and these programmed, survival instincts. And then at the same time, we've evolved in this sense where we have these neural pathways and stuff that no other organism has the same way. And we're able to create that meaning. We're able to define the things in this life that give us purpose. So it's such an interesting marry.
Yeah, it really, and I like that approach of homeostasis and kind of the focus inward. Like, where do I have that homeostasis just in my own, like with the storm of all of the things that are going on in my mind and my feelings. If you've got chronic pain, these things that come up that bother you, I think that's maybe the way that I take this Michael Singer material is for a meaning of life, is how do I create that homeostasis within myself, or recognize. I like what you said, Jessica, seeing the way that my reaction to something is kind of like a yin yang balance to what's going on around me as well. Is that how you see it? Like being a piece of everything that's going on?
I mean, if I think about it, if I were to zoom out and look at a petri dish or something where there's, all of this little world of everything, working together according to this whole idea of being a part of something bigger, is that not the same thing? Like, that we're all doing, functioning within this, whatever idea of a biosphere, the world that we can perceive, we're doing the same. We're acting and relating to one another. Connections are being made, pathways are being formed. And I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So let me kick it back to you, Scott. And did anything that you just heard from either me or Jessica help you with this idea of what to do when you get those work emails and those things that are bothering you?
Yeah, a little bit. Nothing specific, but one thing that Jessica just talked about got me thinking about panpsychism. Have you heard of that, either of you?
Panpsychism. Explain it to me. What is that?
Well, this is I don't really know a lot about it, but I think the idea is that we're all connected psychically.
Mm.
And it's not like woo-woo stuff. I know I've gotten on you, Glenn, about
Can
woo-woo
be,
stuff.
yeah.
But I'm curious though, like Jessica, when you're just talking about how like, we're creating this, we're almost like creating a neural net like that we have in our own minds, right? And I think that the internet is a manifestation of that, right? Where you have all these, billions of people now connected. And I'm kind of curious. I think I wonder if consciousness is, like personally, I think I think my view on life and things is coming around to that. I think I haven't said a lot of this stuff out loud.
Yeah, right.
It might sound stupid, but like I kind of feel like we're all part of God, right? Like God is everything, right?
Yeah.
And that our consciousness is different manifestations, and I'm curious, like, and so in a way, like, in my mind, consciousness is like the highest form of energy, perhaps, the highest manifestation. But I wonder if there's like even more higher ones that will obtain, that are there, but we just haven't gotten there yet, or and like some kind of massive social like connection, and I don't know if that's gonna be like AI or if it's more of an organic thing that really comes about through biological or interaction. But have you guys heard of the book God's Debris?
No.
It's a really short story. It's by a guy named Scott Adams. He's the Dilbert author, and so it's
Oh, okay, I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah, he anyway, it's a real short story, but I invite you guys to read it. It's an interesting read. But he talks about the idea behind it now is that we're manifestations of God, and that basically God kind of killed himself, and like the only thing that God didn't know was what would happen if he wasn't around. And so so God set up a thing where he set his essence into the universe, and we're manifestations of that. And anyway, it's interesting, but I'm rambling, but I think but I like that idea though, Jessica, of the or the neural net, and what are we creating? So
something I found super fascinating too when I was kind of diving off of my little diving board into psychology, like learning more, was I needed to make those connections everywhere. So with neuroscientists, listening to TED Talks and those different ways that, mapping the, neuroconnectors and everything in the brain, to me, there was a really interesting parallel that was made between the idea of understanding the brain and understanding the mind. And you can look at it, and you've probably heard this, but if you look at a city, you look at New York as an entity, and you don't say, what is New York? When you're understanding something like that, cognitively that there's so many things within New York that make up what it is. And so when you're isolating, a little corner street in New York, you can understand and map out what that looks like around the corner and how it connects to the street down the road, But in order to get a sense, like a full sense of what it is, you're going to need to factor in the sounds, the smells, all those different sensory perceptions that maybe we can't even really put words to, but that is still a part of what makes New York, or whatever else that you're comparing it to. And so when I thought about it in the sense of the brain, I think there are so many advancements in so many, areas that we have really been able to pinpoint and isolate and understand capabilities within the brain. But to me, that's what I really appreciate about Jordan Peterson, is the way that he kind of makes reference to the point that we have to have a combination of the metaphysical and the things that we can define. It's like the things that we define kind of provide that scaffolding for the experience that we have. That's also, like we talk about, is very real, but they're all kind of, to understand what consciousness is, you need to factor in all of those questions and ideas that form what a thing is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I keep thinking about all of the cells that are in our bodies that are like all of the complicated things, like each one of them being a living thing that's doing something. And there was a TED talk that Jonathan Haidt did several years ago, and we did an episode on it on Infants on Thrones. I think probably December 2017. I'll have to dig that up again. But he was talking about how when there are single life forms, he was looking at evolutionary biology, and there would be big bullies that would attack the smaller ones, and so the smaller ones would group together to make them, so that they could survive the bigger ones. And that there's this pattern throughout evolutionary history where smaller things get together in groups, and then they create a membrane around that group that protects those together. And he talked about culture as like a metaphorical membrane around groups of people, and how people form groups kind of like cells form groups. And so when you were talking about New York and all of the people, all of the cities, all of the things, and it is almost like a circuit in a brain or something like that. And I know I haven't really looked into Gaia theory. I know that there are people that talk about Gaia, the Earth, being a living creature, and we're kind of like microbes on the surface of it, along with all other kind of living things. And it's an interesting idea to me. and really I can only engage in it at the level of metaphor, as a way maybe of trying to find that homeostasis of like, how do I fit into everything else? What role am I playing? And then maybe going back to that earlier question that you had, Scott, when something is bothering me, how big is that? How significant is that in the grand scheme of things? I can kind of ask myself those questions as a way to let go whatever I feel rising up in me that is uncomfortable or I don't like.
Yeah. I think it's so difficult too to even have a conversation sometimes and like put it into actual meaning, because the way that we're designed is in this very dualistic way of thinking, like it, like it's just a very difficult concept to put into practical use. I think that's one of the biggest things, if I ever share some things with a friend or a relative, is okay, that's great, that sounds
Sure.
wonderful, but like, what do I do with that? And
Right.
I think you do what works for you with that. Like you take, if that means something to you and you see that as a practical tool in helping you create more of a state of just being and being okay, and then use it.
Yeah.
What's funny is that when you just talked about how it's a hard thing to describe, that really reminds me back when I was in the church, right? Because you have these strong feelings, and and I was a crier, and that's one thing that I do hold against the church a little bit, is that it was where I felt, it's where I learned to express my emotions, and I was good at it. I was good at like letting the emotions well up, and it felt good, and it felt good to me inside, and also was good in my group, right? It was, and I think I could have gone really far in leadership because of that. It was something that came natural to me, and now that I'm like out of it, I don't have that anymore, and it really was like a real loss to me, and something that I harbor anger towards the church because for it, but one thing after, and I think this is a recent thing, and Glenn, I attribute this to your podcast, especially the singer and other things, I guess, but like I feel like I've gotten a better hold of that more recently, because I remember a couple of years ago where I really I had that dark night of the soul, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you're really like, oh man, is this really it? Like, is this really, like, I could die and it's all over? And what's going on with that real kind of existential, like, freaking out. And I still go through that sometimes, but I feel a lot better about it now. I feel more in more control of it. Gosh, I don't even know where I was going with that, but
when you say control of it, are you talking about the anger?
No, I still am pissed about that.
And for you too, I have a question about, you say with the church that kind of allowed you to express that emotion, having that outlet in that way. Is that kind of
right, yeah.
I want to know, because I've been curious, even with others, do you still feel that manifestation of the spirit as defined that way in another way now? Do you feel that moving of, being inspired, and like, how is that translated for you since leaving?
So that's where my anger comes in, because I really feel like I was given a counterfeit, right? That like I would have these super strong feelings, and now and I would associate it with the church, and that's true, and this is God talking to me, and I feel like I've been able to kind of like mentally, it's such a hard thing for me at least to like mentally say like, okay, those feelings were good and true, and so for instance, like I think about my mom who passed away, right, and I have a son who passed away, and I usually get very emotional about those things, and it's funny because like I kind of like that emotion, and I wonder, like, it's like a sad emotion, you know what I mean? I don't know, but it's a feeling, I guess. and so like I feel like I'm getting, and it's not even just the church too that I feel like it was giving me the counterfeit. But like I don't know, like I'm getting better at it, but it's almost like the fairy tale's gone, right? And so like I know Santa is not real type of thing. And so it's hard for me to have those same feelings that I did when I thought Santa was real, right? So like but I feel like I'm getting better at finding, let's see if I can keep on the Santa analogy, finding, there's still goodness in giving and receiving gifts, and like, and I guess what I'm coming back around to is there is, even though I don't believe in the fairy tale anymore, and I've lost that fairy tale happiness type of thing, I still see it is actually a fairy tale, right? Like there is more, and one thing that Singer talks about a lot is he'll be like, the moment you have in front of you took 13 billion years to get here, right? And you're going to say you don't like it,
Right.
like, and to appreciate and just to think about all that happened that got you to this point. And that is a fairy tale, right? To my mind, like that's a freaking fairy tale. But it really happened, and I'm trying to appreciate more of that in what I would call in reality, I guess. But it is hard, and that's the lure of religion, I think, and not just the church in particular, but just it gives you that place of, and especially when you're in the culture and you're in testimony meeting and you have 50 people, 100 people looking up at you, and you're saying how you feel and they all feel the same way and you're all crying together, like that is amazing, right? Like, and I don't think I'm ever going to get that feeling ever again, because I'm never going to be in a situation like that again, and so
I feel like I totally parallel with this in the sense of, to me, Disneyland has always been a big thing. And I talked with my oldest daughter who's 13, and she has a very critical thinking mind like her mother. And we've been to Disneyland once, and, you walk past a certain alley and you see the door kind of open with where the employees go, and some of that magic is revealed and as just mechanical. Yeah. And there's that initial feeling of, oh, like that kind of takes away a little bit of that, that atmosphere that's being created here. But when you sit with that in the sense of people's imaginations creating an environment that requires human beings to come together to pour into something to create this perception of whatever, how is that not even more miraculous in the groundings of what's real there, like of what, like you can still maintain that feeling of awe and add to it with some of the functioning behind the scenes type of issues, like, and I think the same thing with Christmas. I think now, like, this is amazing, almost more so to me, just personally. I feel like the fact that this idea and this story of Christ and his birth, or Santa and the, magic, it's like, this has been a tradition that's carried on, and that with it is held all of this like very dear and, special feeling and, promoting this goodness. I don't know, but I think for me too, with feeling the spirit, I think understanding the elevation emotion part, I'm sure that you've studied that avenue, with understanding the fact that that's a very, natural response to that stimuli of it's been measured by MRI and all of those things. But I think just redefining what those feelings are, there's a lot of power that can come from saying, that feeling that was the Spirit to me. Now I appreciate that feeling of awe and splendor when I see a work of art that's just beautiful and think of all of the hours and the time, spent, that it's not defined anymore by, is this Heavenly Father speaking to me? It's more, look at humanity and what we've done. And I feel that, like, I don't know.
Can I drill on that a little bit?
Yeah.
And then I want to too.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead,
Well,
Scott.
I'm the guest. I'm gonna go first.
All right.
So I think that's really great. I appreciate everything you said, Jessica. And I was curious, like, I think that there's, I agree that there's like the feeling of awe and spirit, like, but what about that feeling? Okay. I don't know, you guys may be different, right? But what about that feeling you would get when you're like, Joseph Smith was a prophet and I'm in the right church, and you're not feeling the splendor and awe of like, wow, this is amazing, magnificent. You're like, I'm awesome and I'm in the awesome church. Like like that feeling. Now I feel like that certainty. Okay, there's a feeling, there's something that comes from that certainty, right? I don't think I'm ever gonna get that again. Like and kind of that genre of like the Spirit or that good feeling, like I'll be honest, like right now, like I feel good right now, right? Like I feel like a good influence on me in this conversation, right? I don't attribute that to the Spirit. I don't know. But like what I don't know. You see what I'm saying though? Like I'm curious if I'm ever going to get that
other
certitude.
grounding things though? Are there not other grounding things that make you feel that same, like, I am alive right now. I know this in the very core of my being, that I'm here and I'm breathing and it's a miracle. Or you look at your children's faces and you think, here they are right here. This is real. This is reality, and I'm existing with it. I have evolved to this point and I'm here. Like, to me, that kind of elicits the same, I don't know, confirmation feeling of knowing what is real. Like,
all right, I like that. Okay. Take that certainty with the certainty of what is actually here. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I wanted to you mentioned elevation emotion, Jessica, and I think that's what you're talking about too, Scott, that, what is it? Where does it come from? Is that something that is also biologically evolved along with our species? And this is something that Jonathan Haidt talks about in that TED Talk, because he says he talks about the sacred versus the profane, and he says that the profane, and he's talking about, I think it's Emile Durkheim, who was a French sociologist, who witnessed how do you say it? So at the time of the French Revolution, when they were trying to overthrow the monarchy, they were really attacking religion, because religion was tied to monarchy. And so atheism was really on the rise as a way to separate power from people. And Emile Durkheim looked at this and said, among atheist populations, you can see there's much more depression, despondency, suicide. The rates are all higher. There's less a sense of meaning and belonging to something. And so he talked about the profane being the realm of the individual self, and the sacred being the realm of groups. And that when you as a person do something that's for the benefit of group unity, you're basically doing what all of these individual cells did when they combined together in safety against whatever the outward attacker was. And so there is this biologically evolved elevation emotion that tells you you're doing a good thing for your survival right now. Whether it wears the mask of Jesus or Buddha or, whatever it might be. Even soldiers in war who report these kinds of elevation emotion experiences because they're sacrificing for other people, the people that they're fighting for. This sense of there's something that's bigger than I am. And when you believe in that, when you tune into that, and when you're doing things in the spirit of that, you're more likely to feel this elevation emotion because of the way that we've evolved biologically. That's one of Jonathan Haidt's point in that video that I think is really, really interesting. And it helped me surrender and let go of the anger that I felt towards what towards those some of those masks, some of those symbols, those Dumbo's black feathers that directed my attention into doing something for the group rather than individual, and being in that sacred group space rather than in the individual profane space.
Yeah. Have either of you studied any of Damasio?
No.
Like, yeah, is a neuroscientist that really gets into emotions and homeostasis too as the driving force of even our evolutionary, like the way that we formed, and how, you know, back, I don't know, 20 something years even, you know, they would get together at these conferences and almost no one would give any validity to the idea that emotions play such a substantial role in biology. But within that amount of time, there has been so much consensus on the idea that emotions are biological as anything else, in the sense that the way we've evolved to have those emotions reinforce the things that are going to create that feeling of safety and, you know, equilibrium in that sense. So, you know, you look at, I think it's super interesting to go back way long ago with all the lizards and animals, where before even the nervous system had appeared, you know, these animals and these organisms were functioning as if they were doing things motivated by feeling, or, you know, most of that was instinctual or reactive. Whereas now, you know, with evolution of biology, having that nervous system in place and that appearance of, I think along with that was the birth of what we deem consciousness and self.
Yeah.
And so being able to identify that and the way that those, you know, chemical reactions that existed before are now firing into our brains in ways that regulate things for us. Yeah, we use religion, ideas, stories, structures of other things that help reinforce that.
And it makes sense. You talk about going back to times of lizards and stuff. I mean, I've been watching this series called
anymore.
What's that?
Not that lizards don't exist anymore.
Oh yeah. But going backwards in the stages of evolution, I've been watching 7 Worlds, One Planet. Have either of you watched this?
It's good.
It's really, really good. But it's the, you know, these BBC Earth documentary type things, David Attenborough, where, you know, they spend time, they get these cameras in just some amazing places, and you see spiders, and like there was a snake that evolved this little thing on the end of its tail that looks like an insect, or so a bird will come to eat this thing, but then the snake reaches out and anyway, there's just some amazing stuff in this. But as you watch this, or as I watched it, I thought, it sure looks to me like there is some form of emotion or some form of feeling that these animals have. You know, like we might look at it from the outside, not being able to feel what they feel because we haven't evolved exactly the way that they have, but we've evolved along similar paths where we know we have feelings and their reactions and responses to things around us. Why wouldn't we think that they have feelings, and that feelings kind of motivate and guide the course of whether they survive as a species or not? And can you trace that all the way back to these eukaryotic cells? and do cells have feelings? The cells in our body. There was a really fascinating series that Radiolab did a couple of months ago on gonads and like what's going on. Did you listen to that one, Jessica? Yeah. And it's just so fascinating that all of these different pieces of life that are all around us that we're basically blind to. We're not paying any attention to them, but I'm sure that these feelings and things that we have been guiding the course of evolution, going way, 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 way back to the first single-celled organism. And who even knows what it was like before the single-celled organism, the things that came into play to make that happen. So it just these interesting ideas. So how do you feel now, Scott? Are you feeling the warm burning of truth?
Now I'm feeling a stupor of thought. No, so the question for you guys is the elevation emotion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I really like the idea of looking backwards, and kind of seeing how things go. And Glenn, when you're talking about like what do animals feel and how we compare our thoughts or our feelings to them. I've thought about that a lot as well. And I'm curious, like, I think, the development of language is a really important thing, and being able to put words to these things. And like in my email to you, I said, like, like this self chatter that we have that Senior talks about a lot, I think that's something that separates us from other animals. And I think that we developed it on an evolutionary plane, this constant chatter that's literally going on all the time, right? It is something that I think that developed so to keep us alert, right? That we're always looking around, we're always looking and questioning things, and we have this, and it has helped us to avoid dangers, and then from there it helps us to, like what Senior says, we understand what we like and we understand what we don't like, and then now we worry about getting something we don't like, and we worry about getting things we like, right? And I think that's the primary role of that self chatter now in my head, and you want to quiet it. But I guess, and so I like thinking about language and the development of our intelligence and our consciousness and how that all kind of plays together. But my question for you guys is this: so we have this elevation emotion, right, that we just talked about, and we understand now, and humans understand now, and this is even a recent human development, right? This isn't even like something that we can look at the annals of history, right? We understand that that's like a biological thing, okay, and we're part of a broader biological system. But it's really, it reminds me of the thought that, like, we're matter looking at itself now, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so, like, what does that do to us now? Like, what is the future of humanity now if we understand that? And in my mind, that elevation emotion is what gives people, one of the things about religion, it helps people work together. You have a greater cause, and it's, I think, the backbone of civilization, right? And so, like, I don't think we'd be how we are now if we didn't have it. You know what I mean? If humanity hadn't developed it. And I'm just kind of curious if in my mind, I feel like this is my personal experience. Like, I've cut the legs out from underneath it, right? Like I told you before, like, I don't expect to ever have that elevation emotion again, like I did before. I don't know, it's just kind of interesting to think about it. And there is like a certain kind of sadness when I'm saying this, right? When I'm thinking about this, and I don't know if it's like, I don't know. I think it's this, I've had these expectations, and I've, from growing up in the church, and I don't really necessarily pin this directly on the Mormon church, but just religion more generally. And I don't think it's necessarily like a bad thing, honestly, but it's just, I feel like I find myself in a weird place, and it is difficult though in our culture. And then, Jessica, I am kind of interested in how you've talked about this type of thing with your husband and how you dealt with it in your family, because this is one of the things that that I, one of the reasons, one thing I tremendously worry about is, ruining my family, right? And like losing, like I've got 4 kids, and I work in this field too. Like, I've seen families, divided over this type of thing, and I don't know. I think we'll be okay but I don't know, honestly. I honestly don't know. Anyway, gosh, I just said a lot of stuff.
I'll just say one thing. I want to say one thing that's been really helpful to me and us personally is the fact that we don't know. I mean, the only thing that we know and we feel secure in is how we feel right now, if our needs are being met right now. And I think it's almost liberating to say and admit and really wrap your head around the fact that nobody knows. Nobody knows what it's going to look like in the future. Nobody knows the way that things will go. But I have a core feeling, and I don't know if part of this is my biology or what, but it's just everything will be. Like, everything will be. And we say, okay, but what's okay? I don't know.
Right.
But it will be what it is. And I think you think about anything like transitions that you've been through before you went through a faith crisis or whatever, however you call it. You can't even imagine what that is going to look like or feel like. All you have is the language you have to construct what that idea would be like if it were to happen to you, and then yet here we are here with this crisis or existential, feeling, whatever, dread, but we're okay. Like, we're just still being, we're still functioning within the day, the moment, you know, we're still, and I don't know, and maybe part of that is speaking to some of my like chronic health things too, is the fact that I've had so much fear in the next step or the next thing that I will lose. Like, I mean, the knowledge that I have, I mean, going and sitting in the hospital and having the neurosurgeon kind of go down the whole list of things, you know, that potentially could go wrong. And I think, okay, great. What do I do? Mark on my calendar, you know, like what to look forward to? Or do I just know each time that I've gotten to a place where I thought would be terrible, I deal with it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I adapt, you know, like there's not really a, I think with religion, it gives you those, it kind of feeds you more of those comforting, placating ideas and answers where you don't have to kind of sit within that discomfort for too long and
Right.
really kind of reconcile how you would deal. But we're all beings that are just figuring things out, and we adapt. That's the beautiful thing. So I don't know, that
No, I
helps.
like that. And I think that also goes back to your earlier question, Scott, about like how do you be in the moment but also prepare for the future? So you know, like because what Jessica said is we don't really know what things are going to be in the future, but where are we right now? Are we getting our needs met? And then kind of like dialing up, in order to pay the bills, am I doing what I need to do to pay the bills? You know, those kinds of questions. But there are two things that you said, Scott, that I wanted to riff on. One is about the critical thinking, and then the other one is about the feeling that you have like your legs have been cut out from under you. And this might take a while, so apologies in advance. So with this inner chatter that is going on in our heads, and this is just my opinion of it, I was in Mexico a couple of years ago, and I was waking up in the morning, going out by this beach and just meditating as the sun was rising, and just feeling like, this is awesome. I love life. I love all this stuff. And I'm watching as the waves come in and the waves go out, and they're forming these little tide pools, and there's like living creatures in them that have kind of gotten stuck in the tide pools that are going out. And I thought, I wonder if this is kind of how life evolved from the ocean to land breathers, to air breathers, that just kind of as the tides go in and the tides go out, there's some creatures that got stuck in there, and the ones that were able to hold their breath or whatever the equivalent of that is long enough, that got then washed out to they passed along their genes to others that, okay, they had a greater capacity for being out of the water, for breathing air, and just over long periods of time, there was this trait that developed in certain species. And then I thought, well, what other things would you need? Well, you would need to know, okay, now that I'm out, there's probably going to be places where I need to get food. Where are those? Oh, I need to remember that. I mean, I need to have the ability to move, but I also need to remember where things are, and the things that could remember develop that trait. And then there's dangerous places. If I went to this place and there's a predator there, if I keep going there, I'm going to die. I'm not going to pass along things. So being able to anticipate the future is another one of these characteristics that evolved over time. And then to be able to predict, well, what if I go there, then this happens. And I started thinking of this radar system of our brains and our nervous systems that stores memory, is able to predict the future and create these abstract models of what might happen and make decisions based on that. And I think that's the kernel of this internal chatter. I think that's what's going on. I think what we're doing in our minds is, it's like these echoes, these reverberating vibrational echoes of, okay, here's the environment around me. What do I need to be safe? What do I need to avoid danger? And you know, you said that you think that this inner chatter is something that distinguishes us from other animals, but I think the only part about it that distinguishes us from other animals is the degree to which we've evolved to be able to do this, and that we're doing it in a language that we were taught in our culture. So it speaks back to us, and in introspection. But I don't know that my dogs, like, I don't have dogs now. I used to. I'm sad. I miss my dogs. But I don't know that my dogs aren't introspective. You know, there's times where my dog looks like oh, okay, you know that if you get up on the couch, you're going to be sad. And I could see he wants to get up on the couch. He really wants to get up on the couch, and he's not doing it because he remembers, he knows there's going to be a consequence, things like that. So is he doing his own version of inner chatter that's just not, it's doggy style of inner chatter? I don't know what that would be. So that's what I wanted to say about the inner chatter. I think, there's nothing wrong with it where we think, oh, we need to shut it down, it's a problem. I really like that at one point, Michael Singer says, this isn't about mind control. Right. We're not trying to say that inner chatter is bad or that we need to get rid of it. But it's just like sit back in what he calls the seat of self, recognize what's going on, be aware of what's happening, and just kind of like go with it. And then the comment that you had about your legs being cut out from under you. I think something that has helped me in kind of going back to this New York City metaphor that Jessica talked about earlier, that we're all little bits and pieces in this connected environment around. And even though it might feel like I'm disconnected from whatever group I was raised in, I'm not really. I'm still a part of everything. So like the feeling of having the legs cut out, like explore that, figure out what that's about. But you're still very connected to your wife, to your kids, to your business associates, people around you. There are still a lot of things that you're doing that are for their benefit as well as yours. And one of the messages that I really have loved, and I don't know who to accredit this to, but that when you're working on yourself to create more peace of mind just within this biosphere that is your own body, that actually is impacting the fabric of everything else around you, because you're not separate from everything else around you. There's one less asshole in the world if you've made yourself not an asshole. So maybe if you could focus on those things that you're doing for yourself as being something that benefits everybody around you, your wife, your kids, you could start with that small concentric circle and build outwards. Maybe that sense of having the legs cut out from under you because the stories that you were taught to believe as being literal, now you go, oh, they're not literal. I don't see them as literal anymore. I see them as figurative. I'm not sure how I feel about them. Some of them really make me angry. But you're still connected and kind of working through that stuff.
Yeah, I love that. I think from a parent's perspective, no, that's so good, because it puts you in that place of saying, what? Okay. Well, for me anyway, my brain goes to the things that have really allowed me to just be at peace with however things go as a parent, and especially in a situation where you have a partnership with two different ideals perhaps, or ways of approaching things. It really made a lot of sense to me to view my children in the perspective they have and their advantages in a situation where they have it modeled to them, that there is an existence where you have choices, instead of that framework that made you feel, in direct kind of result that your legs were pulled out, in a sense where if you are taught from a young age that it's okay to make decisions that are okay for you, and by watching you do the things, learn the things that you need to do, and also seeing the things that work for their mom, like that will give them that feeling, initially or ideally could give them that feeling of, it's okay for me to do what I want to do, instead of I have to do this or I have to do it like this. And that opens the door up, I think, a lot to it's going to be okay however it is.
Yeah. And these artificial consequences that if you don't do what you're supposed to do, then you're not going to be with your family forever, or something like that. Because I think with Mormonism, I there's two things about Mormonism I still really love. Like, I love the idea of eternal progression. And I love the idea that we're sealed to our loved ones and that we're sealed to everybody else. What I don't love is this idea that there's this priesthood authority that's going to come in and say, yes, we are the ones. It's through our power that's binding these things together, rather than this is just how everything already is, you guys. Everybody already is sealed together. Oh no, it's this power. And if you don't do X, Y, or Z in the right way, it's not going to be effective. And so it creates fear instead of creating faith and love, and like faith is the way of being able to like roll with the stuff that you don't know and go, okay, yeah, there's all these problems that are going on, but I can trust that it's in the better whole, that it's going to be, maybe not be okay, but maybe it's just going to be, it's all going to work out. It already has. It's been going this way for billions and billions of years. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. I got a little passionate there.
I think too, Brene Brown is a great example of putting you in that seat in your mind, metaphorically, of saying, what is the story that I'm telling myself here? I have a preteen daughter who comes home and it's drama and everything, her world is ending. And I say, whoa. Like, what is the story that you're telling yourself about this experience? I want to hear your take.
How does she respond when you tell her that it's a story?
Well, wait a minute.
This is real, Mom.
Yeah. So, but really, like, if even as young kids, if you hear, one of your kids that have been fighting with the other one, and they come to you and they say, so-and-so just did this to me, and da-da-da. If you can, even at that age, a young age, just say, how do you feel about that? Like, are you thinking about that? Like, I don't know. It just kind of helps them see, oh, okay, well, I'm creating this narrative with this event that maybe has nothing to do with me.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, it's been about an hour. It's been a good conversation. Are there anything, Scott or Jessica, that you wanted to bring up today that we haven't covered? And we can do this again. We don't have to do it all right now.
Yeah, there was one thing that has been stewing on my mind just because of the 620 Hand in the Glove episode. So much was around the idea of death. And I've really I think that was where I was like, okay, I'm giving myself permission to explore ideas, to reconcile this fear or whatever story I'm telling myself about what death is. And I don't know, there were a couple things that have been forming in my brain since then that have made me feel more peace about death. But I'd like to hear from you too, Scott, like what things you've been thinking about as far as death, and if you've kind of reconciled some of
and feel free to make reference to The Good Place, because I know you mentioned that in your email, Scott.
Yeah, okay. I don't remember exactly what I spoke about in that podcast, but I think, so I might be repeating myself, but I appreciate you teaming me up there, Jessica, because I feel like I feel way better about death. I do, and I think that was one, it still is like a scary concept to me. And there's this idea, and like this, I don't know if I said this in the last podcast, but this is kind of like my if I was developing religion, this would be one of the tenets. And I like this idea that we all that we are part of God, okay, and that we're all kind of manifestations of God, and we're all here to experience things, and that God is getting his experience through us, and that when we die, we go back to God. And the question, the big fear to me is, okay, are we gone at that point, right? And I feel like, I don't think so. I think we're in a different state. But I feel better about, like one thing I tell my kids, even as I've lost faith in the church, and even as I've lost faith in, like, Jesus Christ per se, right? Like I would tell them, I'm thankful for Jesus, because, he's made it so that I'll be with my mom again, that you'll see grandma, and he's made it so that your brother, my son, that we're all going to be together again. And even though there was a lot, I think that kernel is probably what really gave me like the real subconscious fear of the church isn't true. Is that not true? Type of thing, And I feel like I've gotten past that just in the last 6 months or so, to where, and it's just like what you said, Glenn, earlier about how, like, the good thing about the church is eternal life, right? But you have to do it this way. If you don't do this, if you don't sign under this on this line and do it this exact way, it's not going to happen. And you just it's almost laughable now, right? Yeah. like you take a step back and you're like, guys, this is how it is. Like you're putting all these trappings and rules around it, but
yeah, like Jesus is this big, powerful person that did the atonement, but it's dormant until the Mormon priesthood activates it. Like, right, come on.
It's just a silly thing, and so I feel much better about, even though, like, I would say, like my mom passed away and my son passed away, like I still feel a connection to them, and I still believe that they're somewhere, that they still exist. And that, and I really like this idea that I came up with where, you know, like there's like a perfect harmony that will come with death and with understanding. And, you know, we'll see, like we will, like all the wrongs that I did to other people, I'll understand, but I'll also understand all the rights I did, and all those people that I wronged, they'll understand why I did those wrong things. Right. And rather than like hell and torment, there's like a harmonization that comes from that, you know, and love and experience all together. And I think that it will be like a happy thing. One thing that I love this idea, and I think I got this a little bit from Jordan Peterson, where, you know, God, a defining attribute of God is that he's limitless, right? And that he's omniscient, all power, all things, right? And the one thing he lacks are limits, okay? And that's what we are. We're full of limits. And that's why I like this idea that we're part of God, and like we're a physical or some kind of manifestation of him. And I like this idea that even down to like a cellular level, our life is defined by limits, right? We have that cell wall, we have the hydrogen bomb or the hydrogen bondings, and all these limits. And I think that as we, and that evolves up higher and higher, and we're individuals, and we have our physical limits around us, but we also have our cultural limits. And I think that with death, those go away, and we return to that limitless state and back into God. But I think we take with us these like our memories and things like that. Now I'm kind of rambling, but I feel like I'm much more at peace with death, and I like that feeling. And, you know, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast too, Glenn, where when I pray now, I'm not praying necessarily to God the Father, right? Even though I still do, like in my heart and my head a lot. But I think also of like, we have these energies, you know, and when I'm seeking like help and guidance, I'm not just like, you know, I don't feel like it's just like, I'm just praying to space. You know, I really do feel like there's energies, and life is energy, you know, and and it's flowing through me, and I can get more out of life. Maybe even the things I want, you know, in Mormon speak, you'd say like, if I have righteous desires, right. And if it's the will of the Father, you know, all these caveats. But I do think there is like you know, there is an energy, and I don't think that that energy goes away when you die. I think you become part of it, maybe. And that reminds me of The Good Place. Have you seen the finale of that?
I saw the finale, yeah.
Yeah, and so it, you know, basically they walk through so they go to heaven, right? And then heaven's boring, and so they create death, right? And
Oblivion or whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah, and so they walk through, and then they turn into, you know, dust and fade away. And I wonder like if it's like that, you know, but I don't know. But that's the hard part, thinking about, are you gone, right? That's a scary thing. And
well, what's funny is like you say, turn into dust, as if we aren't already that. Right. You know, like with like that is what we are, but it's, you know, like our biology is allowing it to be what we are right now, but that energy isn't just this separate thing that's me. It's all the other, but there's portion of it that's doing me, and then it'll go back to being not that. But, you know, if Einstein was right that all time exists all the time, then this moment that we're in right now always is here. Yeah. Always. And if there is some kind of omniscient, omnipotent energy that can go back and revisit it at any time and go, oh, I want to try it again where I do this a little bit differently, or this a little bit differently. And it, like, I think of it as like bits of computer programs that are self-running and and whatever they're interested in doing, they can do. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, if death is just a dirt nap, and maybe I said this in that's episode 620, I don't remember what I said, but if death is just a dirt nap, bring it on. You know, I won't know the difference.
It's super, I don't know, it's grounding to me to think, I don't remember what it was like to be a fetus. I don't remember what it was like at the form of sperm and egg, like, but before that, I understand, along with kind of some of those like Buddhist ideas of, you know, interdependence and impermanence, you know, it's like, I've never not been. In some form, in some phase, I've always existed, and that will continue on. And I think it's helpful to me to think about, I mean, things that we can see like clouds, you know, the way that we define when a cloud began is perhaps when us as, you know, perceptions that we have, we see, oh, it appeared there. That's the beginning of the cloud. But did it exist before then? Absolutely. In water particles and in a river or an ocean, you know, before that, and it will phase out into whatever it is after that. It doesn't mean that it's gone.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah.
So,
And all of that energy that's doing us right now is also creating that inner chatter that is our ego or our personality that we most closely identify with. I think that's what people are most afraid of with death is that going to go away, that sense of identity of like, okay, maybe right now I am a living cloud, but eventually I'm not going to be. Then what? and I'll give you a sneak peek. I'm going to be interviewing a woman soon who had a near-death experience, and I talked with her on the phone about it the other day, and she has this memory of being out of her body, watching the doctor like shine a flashlight into her eyes. So she's seeing this from outside, but then she's also seeing the light coming in. And he said, she's not there. There's no one there. And she remembered laughing, like laughing, like, of course I'm here, but it wasn't audible. But so this sense of a conscious self that exists outside, is that real? Was that just something that she was imagining? Who knows? But it's an interesting idea, and you know, we don't really know. We don't really know what it's going to be. Well, but even the worst case, I mean, like, what is the worst case scenario? Is like hell, I guess. Like, really? You get punished for things that you did in that life, and I don't know. I don't think that's very probable.
I was trying to think of an instance to be able to talk to my 13-year-old the other day about how it could feel okay to give up that sense of knowing and have that be comforting of what's going to happen. And the only comparison I could come up with in that moment is that feeling, you know, depending, I guess, on your childhood, there is that time where you're just young enough where you kind of, you're just old enough where you understand your surroundings. You have a mom, a dad, a caretaker, yet you don't always know where you're going. When you get in the car, you're going somewhere, but there's that like comfort of my dad is driving and we're going to go. If I want to close my eyes right now, I can close my eyes. And it's this like really warm feeling of it's going to be okay. I'm going to get where I need to go. And thinking about that now, it's like, I don't know what God is, but that feeling that I feel that I love and that I associate with everything's going to be okay, I think still exists in the sense of whatever nature is doing and whatever happens as a result of experiences here, I'm going to be carried in some form or another through it. And that really, to me, is comforting, knowing that the most sure thing is that it, you know, it happens, that it ends up happening. So I think the fun part is trying to figure out what kind of meaning we assign to it. But ultimately, we all move on. We all change.
Yeah.
So.
All right. In wrapping up, I am going to recommend the book that you guys might be familiar with. It's pretty recent. It's called The Immortality Key by Brian C. Muraresku. Muraresku. He was on Joe Rogan a couple of weeks ago, so you could listen to that interview or the audiobook. It's almost like a real life Dan Brown novel, like the Da Vinci Code kind of thing, but the clues, what he's unpacking, going way back into history, isn't that Jesus had a daughter and that knowledge has been kept underground. It's that Christianity itself was influenced by these death cults, I guess, that were in ancient Greece, like what was it? Like the Euclidean mysteries, something like that. But basically that there were these cults around psychedelics where people would have an experience of what they thought was death, what it was like to be dead. And then they would come back from that. And it completely eradicated their fear of death. It changed the way that they viewed the world that they lived in. And that this is a very, very ancient human experience that has been suppressed by the establishment, priests that would rather be the intermediary between worshipers and God, instead of allowing people to have a direct experience with God. You got to go through us. Our priesthood is what's going to seal you together. You're not already just sealed, that sort of thing. But it's a really, really good book, really fascinating read. And whether you're interested in psychedelics or not, this idea of death that's so closely tied to that experience, at least the way that it was practiced there, I'd recommend that. Very interesting.
Study the brain alongside that, because what happens in your brain when you go on, psilocybin and those things, it's really fascinating how the functionality lines up. It mellows out, functions better than in your normal, your programmed state, and it kind of takes away.
Yeah.
Super fascinating.
Right. Is that Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind?
Well, there's a TED Talk that I actually just listened to this morning. It's Simeon Karamedshi. I don't know what it is, but I can send you the link. But it's all psychedelics and his studying of the mind and what happens in your brain when you're on those psychedelics. But TED Talks are nice and concise.
They are. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming on. This was a really fun discussion.
It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Put down the weapons that you use against yourself. You don't need them anymore. Lay down the weapons that you use against the world. We don't need another war. Put down the weapons that you use against yourself.
Hi, this is Hillary.
Matthew, Ryan,
Carol,
Keith,
Ashley, and I like to play bingo online while listening to Infants on Thrones.
You can comment on this episode on the website, infantsonthrones.com.
And if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes.
I did.
Anyone for the closing prayer?
My worst crime is an inside job. Dark thoughts taking over like an inside mob. I tune into the scene between the eyes and take a breath.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Throne.
I sit still and watch the thoughts float past me. Never mind the future, never mind what the past be. I like to jump and let the universe catch me. Free fall, watch the beauty blow past me. I keep my pockets light, destination in sight. Keep my actions elevated to compassionate heights. I'm walking past the fight, laying down on Sunday night. Choosing love when I pick up this mic.